So is MicroStrategy stock a good stock to buy right now? What's going on, guys? It's Ricky with TechBud Solutions here with another quick fundamental and technical analysis. The previous video that I made of Palantir was such a good hit. Some of you guys asked me to make this video, so here it is. All I ask in return is drop a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know down in the comment section what video you would like me to make next on your favorite top stock. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. There's going to be a lot to talk about, so sit back, relax, and at the end of the video, feel free to share your thoughts down in the comment section. Now, if you don't know what MicroStrategy is, you must be living under a rock because it's been a very popular stock. I want to talk about the good and I want to talk about the bad. What's the good about MicroStrategy? In my opinion, it was a Hail Mary approach that has paid off thus far. So what do I mean by that? Well, MicroStrategy itself is technically a software company. It's been around for over 30 years. It was trading during the dot-com bubble where Michael Saylor and his company lost $6 billion. And at one point, I think was even found for accounting fraud. Nonetheless, it's survived this long. And again, why do I call it the Hail Mary approach? The reason I call it the Hail Mary approach is because it wasn't doing anything for a number of years. Up until, as you could see with its normal trading volume, up until 2020. Well, what happened at the end of 2020 that caused MicroStrategy's price to skyrocket? We're going to get into that. One thing that I am going to be doing is when I perform a fundamental analysis, I'm going to be using Investing Pro. This is where I have a little bit of a better understanding of, again, what its PE ratio is, what the company is producing, the net income of the company, everything from an actual analysis where research has already been done, and it breaks it down for me of exactly what this company produces in revenue to what it actually takes home in profit. And again, all of this is provided for you through Investing Pro. And again, that's the first link in the description down below if you want the biggest discount. You can sign up for it, test it out, and if you like it, you can continue to use it. If you don't, you can cancel at any time. But again, the first link in the description down below. The first thing that I want to talk about is, again, understanding that MicroStrategy originally was a software company. But the thing that you will quickly see is that when we quickly look into, well, does this company make a profit? No, it actually loses money every single quarter. And if we click on its earnings, again, this is not an opinion, it's a fact. You can see that not only the performance of the stock every time that it reports earnings is almost always negative, but on top of that, it just always loses money. And this is quarter after quarter. When you do even a deeper dive and you look into how it actually produces most of its revenue, you would see that the revenue that they still have yet to report, supposedly with the new accounting rule, is going to be their unrealized gains on their Bitcoin holding. And that's exactly what MicroStrategy is now known for. It's not its software company that doesn't produce a profit, but it's its Bitcoin holder. So again, Bitcoin holdings, my apologies. And again, I need to talk about the good and I need to talk about the bad. Let's talk about the good. So the thing that Michael Saylor did that was quite unique is what I want to call it, is that he was able to find a way to invest into Bitcoin by borrowing against his shares of MicroStrategy. So what this process is called is they issue debt, or they issue these shares that are offered as convertible bonds. Pretty much MicroStrategy offers these shares. So as they continue to offer more shares, it continues to dilute current shares or shareholders. And again, it's a very simple Google search you can pull up for yourself. You can ask a very simple question. Does MSTR dilute its shareholders? Yes, MicroStrategy has diluted its shareholders through the stock sale and debt to fund its Bitcoin purchases. This has decreased the ownership percentage of existing shareholders. Again, if you do a little bit more of your due diligence, you would see that just recently on January 21st, they passed and approved a vote where this would allow MicroStrategy to offer up to 10.3 billion more shares, diluting investors even further. So this would put MicroStrategy with more outstanding shares than all except 4 of the largest members of the NASDAQ 100, such as NVIDIA, Apple, Alphabet, and Amazon. It has more outstanding shares than all the other ones once it completes its 10.3 billion share offering. This is how aggressive Michael Saylor is being with his dilution of MicroStrategy shares. But again, he needs to continue to dilute investors because he needs to borrow against those shares so he could buy more Bitcoin. Now let's talk about some of the good. Some of the good would be that, well, is this working? Or why did MicroStrategy originally begin to take off? It went from $9 per share to highs of $131. We have to give credit where it's due, right? From $9 all the way to highs of $131. That is a 1,000% return. Ricky, why do you not like this stock? It grew so much. I agree. And again, this is where I call it the Hail Mary of all Hail Marys. Michael Saylor got his struggling company, found a way to borrow against these shares to be able to raise money at 0% interest to buy Bitcoin. And that's exactly what is explained here. Again, they issue debt. They use that debt to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin's price goes up. And as Bitcoin's price goes up, that makes MicroStrategy money because they're invested into Bitcoin. So therefore, MicroStrategy's market cap continues to go up because now people are investing into MicroStrategy because they call themselves a Bitcoin treasury. MicroStrategy's market cap goes up. Now they're able to borrow and dilute more investors, so it's not as noticeable as the market cap continues to go up. They offer more shares, borrow against that debt, buy more Bitcoin, and repeat the process all over again. Some people like to call it the MicroStrategy Ponzi loop. Again, what they're doing is diluting their shareholders by offering more shares at 0% interest to buy Bitcoin. And in return, you're supposed to gain exposure to this leverage Bitcoin ETF is what they call themselves. Well, this Bitcoin ETF is like a 10x leverage ETF that continues to decay over time. I mean, there's a reason why you don't invest in triple or 10x leverage ETFs over a period of time because they're leveraged and due to path dependencies, they decay over time. And it's been no different for MicroStrategy. So did this originally work for MicroStrategy? Yes. Did it last long? In my opinion, no. This is where it would make more sense to trade MicroStrategy and not invest into MicroStrategy. So what do I mean by that? Went from $9 per share to highs of 131. Let's look at the dates. This thing began to go up around September, and then it peaked around February of 2021. And then it came crashing down, right? We all acknowledge that. It went from 131 and it lost 88% of its value, 88, right? Well, what happened after February of 2021? What caused this pump and what caused the dump? You won't believe it, right? It's not that MicroStrategy found a super lucrative way to increase the business revenue and it was exceeding everyone's expectation. No. It bought Bitcoin, and as it bought Bitcoin, Bitcoin's price began to go up. This is why I call it the Hail Marys of all Hail Marys, right? Michael Saylor went for, the entire, I don't even watch football, but went for the craziest touchdown ever, and it worked for a period of time because you could see, again, when did this price begin to go up? You could see that right around 2020. So right around the middle to the end, September of 2020, we began to see Bitcoin's price begin to push up. Again, if we look at MicroStrategy and when this thing began to happen, right around the same time, we could see right around September to October is when MicroStrategy's price really began to take off. When looking at that, well, what happened right around February of 2021? Again, you wouldn't believe it. It's crazy, right? It's crazy how this thing kind of like works with one another. That's when Bitcoin's price nearly peaked. And then from that point, there was a retracement, it recovered, and then ultimately ended up selling off to the end of 2023, right? Let's look at MicroStrategy's price. Again, you can do this due diligence yourself. We peaked, we began to sell off. It's crazy, right? It tried to recover, but now couldn't even get back to previous highs. This is where the leverage and the decay really begins to take part. And then we could see that ultimately ended up selling off until the middle to the end of 2022, up until 2023, when Bitcoin's price began to pick up again, and then again, creating this whole roller coaster all over again. The reason I'm sharing this with you is for you to understand the cycles. This is why I believe that MicroStrategy is not a good stock to be invested in. MicroStrategy might be a good stock to trade, right? To get in, get out, make your money and bounce. But ultimately, just like Bitcoin, it will come crashing down because MicroStrategy has no true business. When you look at the actual business itself of MicroStrategy, and again, this is provided for you. You can do your own due diligence by looking at this. When you do your own due diligence, you can see that the growth of the company, like this is not an opinion, this is a fact. Let me pull it up for you. If you look at the actual financials, if you look at the revenue, there is no growth. If you look at overall just everything, when it comes down to MicroStrategy, there is nothing that is showing signs of continuous growth from this business. But let's compare it to a very successful company currently, Palantir. Palantir, when it comes down to growth, quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter, growth, 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 growth. So again, do I think Palantir is a very safe and bulletproof company? No, I still think it's overvalued, but at least its fundamentals kind of are a little bit more of support to support that rally, right? Fundamentally, it's a well-ran company with no debt and has $5.2 billion in its balance sheets. When it comes down to, that's Palantir, right? When it comes down to MicroStrategy, a very different picture that it begins to paint. And again, it doesn't take any form of rocket science. I mean, Investing Pro makes it very easy for you to understand. It's cash flow health, very bad. It's growth health as a business, very bad. The only thing that it has going for it is price momentum. And that is because the price gains so much momentum as Bitcoin gains so much momentum. So this entire company, which is the part that really cracks me up, like you can do a full audit if you want to of this company. The revenue, $463 million is what it produces, yet it has a market cap of $85 billion, okay? Cost of goods, gross profit, all this stuff, right? It breaks it down for you. And then supposedly operating profit, it lost $1.9 billion. It's like, if you look at its most recent filing, it is laughable that not only did this company not make money, but it even missed at a larger multiple. It was a miss of over 5,000% of its earnings per share. I think the expectation was for it to lose 12 cents per share, and it lost $3.20 per share. This company is good at one thing, and that is losing money. You know what could really maybe motivate some investors to kind of believe in this company a little bit more? We all know the software itself doesn't make any money. We all know that that part of this business is not growing. It would genuinely make more sense of all this operating profit and all this mess that it has is MicroStrategy does one thing, and they buy Bitcoin. You don't need a big building for that. You don't need a huge company for that. Why not get rid of everything? Why not just focus on the one thing, the one strategy that you love to highlight? Buy Bitcoin. You don't need any fancy office for that. You don't need a fancy CEO. You want to buy Bitcoin on a weekly basis, borrow against your shareholders at 0% interest, and repeat that whole process over and over again. And just hope and pray that Bitcoin's price continues to go up. Because we all know that when Bitcoin's price begins to retrace, MicroStrategy's price will most likely also retrace, just like we saw back in 2021 to 2022 with this 88% crash. This is why so many people view MicroStrategy as a ticking time bomb. Now, this is where I really want to get into the nitty-gritty. So I just explained to you why I don't believe in this company, why I think that it's a ticking time bomb. But in doing so, I also highlighted the Hail Mary success story of Michael Saylor. He found an attractive way to be able to attract a lot of Bitcoin and crypto bros to invest into his company, a Bitcoin treasury, to be able to buy more Bitcoin, and is now the largest Bitcoin holder in the world, supposedly, right? And he does hold a lot of Bitcoin at an average price of $65,000. So right now, I think they hold about $45 billion worth of Bitcoin. Right now, its market cap is $83 billion. It is trading at a multiple of its current holdings. So what do you think is going to happen if Bitcoin begins to retrace? If Bitcoin's price begins to fall? Because we all know it's not a surprise. Bitcoin, every time that it crashes, it doesn't crash 10, 20, 30%. From its highs to its lows, it crashed 76%. Again, not an opinion, it's a fact. Back in 2018, how much did it crash? 82%. So based off of the two previous crashes, it has lost at least 70%. So that means based off of our current highs, I'm not saying that this has to be the highs that it makes, but even if it just drops, what would that be? 41%. that would mean that at that point, with a 40% drop, MicroStrategy is now in the red with all of its Bitcoin holdings. And this is where I think that MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor can get in a lot of hot water. I think he's done an incredible job attracting a lot of people to invest in his vision of a Bitcoin treasury. But everyone wants to support you while you're winning because Bitcoin is bullish. We all know that Bitcoin always crashes. So when that does begin to happen, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how people continue to view Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy. Because if we're trading at a multiple of what its Bitcoin holdings are, I wonder if we will be trading then at a negative multiple of what its Bitcoin holdings will be when it's in the red. Because again, everyone wants to support you when you're winning. No one wants to be a part of your process when you're losing. And again, you can make with what you want with that. The thing that I also want to highlight is its recent price action. It hasn't been as fun for myself trading MicroStrategy because now shares are being diluted so bad. And this is the part that really cracks me up about this whole thing, is MicroStrategy used to trade from lows of 300 to its highs of 400. But recently, it hasn't even been able to return back to 400. But why? If you pay attention to this, Bitcoin's price, right? If we look at recent price levels, when it hit 109,000, that was January 20th, right around that time. January 20th, it hit 109,000. Why is it that if we look at MicroStrategy's all-time highs, that's November 21st. Well, what happened on January 20th? We hit highs of, $400 per share. $400 per share from previous all-time highs. That is a 28% drop. You are telling me that at the highest point that Bitcoin had, which again, this is a Bitcoin treasury, right? I thought this was a way to invest into Bitcoin in a leveraged way. You're telling me that when Bitcoin hit all-time highs, this thing was still trading at $400 per share, down 28% from its previous all-time high. And currently, from its previous all-time high, is currently down 39%, nearly 40%. Nearly half of its value has been wiped out. And Bitcoin is still trading at nearly $100,000 per coin. So I'm a big believer in, if you want to invest into an asset, invest into the asset yourself. Buy Bitcoin if you think that Bitcoin is the future. Why would you ever want to invest? And this is very simple. Why would you ever want to invest into a stock of a software company that says that they are a Bitcoin ETF when all they do is do these share offerings, dilute your ownership of this company, which means your exposure to Bitcoin, and continue to offer more of these shares, continues to dilute you, and you don't experience the same growth you would have experienced if you just would have invested in the asset itself. Now, the part that really cracks me up about all of this is that if you talk to a MicroStrategy investor, they will say there is not one stock that you could have invested in that would have yielded a better return in the past 5 years than MicroStrategy. And let me explain to you what they are saying. They're saying because back in 2020, we're still within that 5-year period, which again, the timeline will change for them. But from $9 per share, when it peaked, at one point it was up over 4,000. But as of right now, it's like 2,500%, right? Great. The part that cracks me up about this is that imagine if during the GameStop movement, imagine if during the meme stop movement, when it would, again, this is before all of its stock splits, when it went from whatever it's 64 cents, that's pre-split, all the way to highs of 120, this was an 11,000% return. Imagine people saying, what do you mean GameStop's a bad stock? Name one company, right? Name one company that has experienced an 11,000% return in the past year. Because that is true technically, because it's pumping. Because it is during its bull run. It's still pumping, right? There's the whole short squeeze happening. But those are short-lived catalysts. We all know that it always comes crashing down. And it's very specific when they use that timeline into consideration. And you will see people trying to defend this down in the comments section. Well, they'll say, MicroStrategy is the best investment anyone has ever made in the past 5 years because the timeline, they're only using what it was trading at and what it's at now, not the sell-offs that have happened in between, or that they both most likely will be short-term catalysts, because you would have not asked that question back in 2022 or even in 2023 when it was trading at $25 per share, right? Because MicroStrategy at that point went from $9 per share to highs of $30 per share. Again, still 140% return, very impressive, but it would have not been that single best investment you ever could have made. So it's these timelines that they use of like, even take the last 3 months into consideration. They're very specific with the dates they use. What about the last 3 months? Just ask them one question. What about the last 2? Because now we are getting to the point where from the time that it's peaked, that's if you invested into MicroStrategy from any time of November and now, you are most likely in the red, right? From the peak to where we are now, it is down 38%. And that is in the past 82 days. So now we are getting to that 3-month mark. So they're not going to be able to use that phrase anymore of, well, what stock has experienced the 50% return in the past 3 months? Because now their timeline is falling apart. And this is what always happens is, again, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that this was a good stock to trade during the bull run, because that's exactly what it was. It was a pump and then a dump, just like it was back in 2021, right? When it went from lows of $9 to highs of $131. But it's all derived around the price of Bitcoin. It's not that complicated. In my opinion, MicroStrategy doesn't need $400 million in revenue and a bunch of expenses to be reporting a negative loss every single quarter to do what it's doing. MicroStrategy is a company that dilutes their investors. They borrow at 0% interest, and they use that money to buy Bitcoin. You don't need anything fancy for that, right? But he wouldn't be able to do all of this if it wasn't for his company MicroStrategy that was previously failing, right? And the last thing that I want to leave you with is, if this was such a successful business model, which you hear him talk about all the time, he says, I think every big billionaire and CEO should dump every asset. I think every country should dump every asset, something along those lines, and just buy Bitcoin. Of course, he is saying that because if billionaires and everyone that controls the market or has a ton of money would pour billions and billions of money into Bitcoin, then obviously that would create a positive catalyst for Bitcoin itself, and him being a large shareholder or a large owner of Bitcoin, I think he has like 2.1%, it would create Bitcoin's price to go up and be in his benefit. Of course he would say that. But what about Jensen that runs NVIDIA? Why isn't he concerned about buying Bitcoin? Why doesn't he do the same share offerings to dilute their shareholders that Michael Saylor's doing, right? Why didn't Steve Jobs do it? Why didn't Jeff Bezos? Why doesn't Mark Zuckerberg? Why doesn't Elon Musk? Why don't they dilute their investors, borrow at 0% interest, and then just buy Bitcoin? Some of them might buy Bitcoin, don't get me wrong, right? But they don't need to borrow against their shareholders because that's just shady, right? Because they're actually running successful businesses. They don't need a facade of this is a Hail Mary approach in trying to make money, which again, it has worked for him, as his company now is probably worth more than it ever has in its past, but it's all because of hype. Again, just like GameStop, it all came crashing down. So it's easy to talk the talk when you're up, but just like in 2022 to 2023, when MicroStrategy crashed 88%, I never heard a whistle. We never heard anything from them. But then Bitcoin's price begins to pick up, MicroStrategy's price begins to pick up, and then everyone starts yapping again. Because again, it's easy to talk when you're on top. So again, I wanted to provide a very simple breakdown that talked about the fundamental business of MicroStrategy and why I think it ultimately will come crashing down. And also wanted to provide you with some quick technical analysis that you can all do, right? Comparing the price of Bitcoin and MicroStrategy, the crash back in 2021, 2022, and the crash that MicroStrategy had as well. And a very simple breakdown of the dilution. that if MicroStrategy was such a good investment because of its leverage way to be able to invest in Bitcoin, then ultimately you actually would have made more money investing in Bitcoin in the past few months than you would have if you just invested in MicroStrategy, because MicroStrategy has not grown in the past 2 to nearly 3 months. It's nearly lost about 40% of its value because, again, Michael Saylor continues to dilute his investors. So you guys let me know down in the comment section what you think. As long as Bitcoin remains bullish, MicroStrategy does have an environment to potentially sustain itself and succeed. But as soon as Bitcoin begins to fail and comes tumbling down, then that is where I believe the ticking time bomb will begin to implode for MicroStrategy. So I'm super excited to follow up. You guys let me know down in the comment section what you think and what stock you think I should break down next. I hope that it earned a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing. And don't forget, if you want to watch me trade live as soon as tomorrow, that's going to be linked down below for our live trading session. And if, again, you want to break down and use the Investing Pro feature, that's going to be either linked in the comment section or the first link in the description down below. Like always, let's make sure that we end the year on a green note. Take care, team.